Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, The Man Crisis. Learn why so many men are struggling to find their way in an increasingly gynocentric world in The Man Crisis. Get your copy of The Man Crisis in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. Over the weekend, we had one of these beta males participate in one of the worst acts of anti-Semitism on U.S. soil in U.S. history. And this beta male, Robert Bowers, a 46-year-old from Pittsburgh, decided he was going to take an assault rifle and 3 handguns into a Jewish synagogue and kill all the Jews there. Now, many people are caught up in their emotions regarding this recent mass shooting and the anti-Semitism that motivated this mass shooting. However, once you take away your feelings regarding anti-Semitism, you will start to soon see that Robert Bowers' behavior clearly fits within a pattern regarding these mass shooters, such as Dylan Roof, who a couple of years ago participated in a similar mass shooting where he went to a black Christian church and decided to slaughter all of the black patrons of that church. And his behavior is no different than Omar Mateen, who decided that he was going to go to the Pulse nightclub to slaughter all of the homosexuals who were at the Pulse nightclub. And it is no different than Elliot Rodger, who decided that he was going to slaughter everybody he saw because he could not get the attention of a woman. And it's no different than that Canadian man who said he was an incel and decided he was going to take a van and run over people because he could not get a woman, or your George Sodini, who decided he was going to go out here and slaughter people because even though he went to work out and got buff, he could still not get the attention of a woman. And when you take a critical look at all of these mass shooters, you clearly start to see a pattern emerging regarding their behavior. And that pattern is emerging regarding their behavior because what really is the foundation of all of these men participating in their acts of violence primarily is the fact that most of these men came from single mother households. And because these men were primarily raised in either single mother households or divorced households that became single mother households, this is what led to these men growing up to learn a dysfunctional frame of upbringing. Because what makes a beta male is the fact that he grew up in a household where he grew up under female authority and he learned feminine life skills and feminine social skills. And because he has learned feminine life skills and feminine social skills, the beta male, in most cases, is an emotional thinker and not a critical thinker. And because the beta male is an emotional thinker, he does not see reality as it is. And this is why most of these beta males get caught up in rhetoric like the anti-Semitic rhetoric that some people posted on social media sites like Gab.ai and places like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Because as it relates to the beta male primarily, what motivates him is his thinking process. And again, his thinking process is deeply flawed because he has learned to feel instead of think. And because he has learned to feel instead of think, he does not process information in a logical way. And the reason why he does not process information in a logical way is because, again, he's emotional. And because he is emotional, he sees the world through rose-colored glasses. And this is a very dangerous perception for a man to have, because when you see the world through rose-colored glasses, you don't see the world as it actually is. What you actually see is the world from a distorted view and a very unrealistic view. And your Robert Bowers clearly was seeing the world through rose-colored glasses. And when he went on the internet with those rose-colored glasses on, he did not see the reality regarding things. Instead, he got caught up in all of this rhetoric that I have heard, even in my own comment section, regarding Jews. And it's that rhetoric that he got caught up in that led to him becoming this hate-filled person. Because I've seen this type of information online myself. I've heard many other people talking about things like your George Soros, your Rothschilds, and all of these Jewish conspiracies, and they are all over the World Wide Web. And many people buy into these Jewish conspiracies. They take them for gospel truth, and because they have no critical thinking skills, they take this information that they have received as fact without doing any sort of research. Because that's another trait of your beta male. Your beta male, he is a very naive, very gullible person. And people tell him things, and he believes them for gospel truth without questioning them, analyzing them, or challenging them. And because they get caught up in rhetoric, they take rhetoric for fact, and this is what really drives the beta male to sit there in places brooding in anger and thinking that the solutions are things like killing all the Jews, killing all the gays, killing all the blacks, or killing all the women. Because that's the way your beta male thinks. Everything with him is very black and white, and he does not really see things in shades of gray. And because he does not see things in shades of gray and does not understand how to process information, this is what makes a beta male extremely dangerous. It's his thinking process that makes him extremely dangerous, because he does not really, again, think like a logical person. Instead, he thinks very emotionally, and because he's emotional, what he does is he acts on impulse. And he's acting on impulse without ever thinking about the consequences of his actions. Because I can guarantee you that this Robert Bowers, like your Elliot Rodger, like your Dylan Roof, like your Omar Mateen, was living inside of his head. Because this is another trait of beta males, is that they live inside of their heads. They don't see the real world, and they act on their behavior, not thinking about the real consequences to others or even to themselves. Because your Robert Bowers was probably in his mind, like Stephen Paddock, imagining all what would happen if he killed all of these people. Because just like your Dylan Roof, this beta male probably thought, if I kill all the Jews, this will start to motivate others to go out here and kill more Jews. And that's the way these guys think, again, because they are inside of their heads. They're not living in the real world. They're living inside of a fantasy. And they believe that if they do something, that it's going to lead to other people being motivated. But these people that they are motivated are, again, inside of their head. And these guys are egged on to do things on social media, and not understanding that social media is a vacuum, social media is an echo chamber, and social media is not a real place, it is a virtual place. And this is, again, another part of the danger of beta males, is that, again, they don't live in our world. They live in a fantasy world, they live in a virtual world, and these guys will sit here and they'll talk all of this stuff about how much they hate a certain group or a certain group of people, and they think that this is the real world. This is what motivates not only these racists and these anti-Semites, but it motivates others like your incels or other factions that have emerged from these beta males. But the foundation of all of these violent men is that beta male way of frame of thinking and that single mother household that primarily these beta males came from. But most people in America, they don't want to talk about that foundation where these men came from, because to talk about the foundation where these men came from would mean, one, we would have to actually confront women about the way we have been raising boys, and two, we would have to change things critically throughout our society regarding the way we raise and care for children. And that means that women could no longer really work in the workforce, and that would actually mean that businesses would have to change the way they do business. And that's something most Americans just don't want to do because they like making money and they don't really want to really make any efforts to fix things as related to the family, because the reason why we have had this escalation in mass shootings over the last 30 years is because of the rise of the single parent household, the rise of daycare, and the rise of gynocentric authority. And because we had boys under gynocentric authority, where they have grown up primarily in these single mother households, many of these boys don't see a value to being a man. They don't see a worth to being a man. They don't see any power to being a man. And they look for someone to blame for their powerlessness, like your Robert Bowers. And because we have this World Wide Web where we have all this misinformation online, these beta males take this misinformation as gospel truth again, and they take that gospel truth and find this group to make a scapegoat for their feelings of worthlessness, their feelings of lack of value, and their feelings of lack of self-esteem. This is what they do. They feel worthless. They feel like they have no value. They feel like they have no purpose. And these groups give them someone to scapegoat. So they go on social media and sites like your Gab.ai. They interact with people like these anti-Semitic groups and these white nationalists and white supremacist groups. And these people give them a scapegoat to blame. Again, this is not just a guy who hates Jews. This could be a guy who hates blacks. This could be a guy who hates Mexicans. This could be a guy who hates women. And again, all of these guys, these mass shooters, they're looking for someone to blame for their feelings of inadequacy, their lack of self-esteem, their lack of self-worth. And once they have this scapegoat, they can use that scapegoat to be the motivator for them participating in this violence, because they feel that because they have no value in the world, they're going to then try to destroy the world around them. And this is what your Robert Bowers decided to do when he went to that synagogue. He was going to kill all the Jews in his area, he believed, because he had that fantasy in his mind that if he killed all the Jews, it would make things better for him. Unfortunately, as he participated in this mass shooting, what happened was reality set in when those police officers and those SWAT officers stormed this synagogue. And as this man was getting shot back at by police, this is what happened to Robert Bowers. He decided to surrender. Now, your Robert Bowers is very different from your Omar Mateen and your Dylan Roof and your Elliot Rodger in realizing that once the reality set in and they would have to deal with the consequences of their actions, these men decided to finally take their lives. Because after they killed all of those people and realized it had next to no impact on the world, that's when these men decided to take their lives. Because what the beta male again believes is that this fantasy he has in his mind, where he kills out and participates in this grand act of violence, this act of infamy, will lead to, again, this things making a radical change. And what it does is it doesn't happen, and that's when these men usually decide to take their lives, because they know that they're going to have to deal with the reality, and because they are cowards, they decide to kill themselves rather than face this reality of the world around them. But your Robert Bowers, again, decided that as a coward, he didn't want to be murdered by the police because being murdered by the police would mean that he couldn't be the hero or the infamous person who acted heroically. So he decided to surrender. And this is another, again, beta male trait is that these men fold under pressure, and when they face reality, that's when these men fall apart. Now, your Robert Bowers, again, is a textbook beta male, and as I was watching the report on this Robert Bowers, I just immediately identified him as a beta male. I remember watching the report on Saturday afternoon, and they were talking about him, and I said automatically, I said beta male almost instantly. And when I heard him talking about Jews and getting on the internet, I knew what I was dealing with because I've seen this in my comment section on the regular. All these guys, again, talking about these crazy conspiracy theories like the Jews controlling Hollywood, Jews controlling business, and things like the Rothschilds and George Soros. And I know this rhetoric like the back of my hand, and I've heard it on from numerous comments and even in other YouTube videos. So I've seen this content on the regular, but because I can think critically, I can take it with a grain of salt. Unfortunately, your beta male can't take it with a grain of salt. He imbibes this information without ever going to cross-reference it or cross-check it or do any research. And because he doesn't cross-check it, he internalizes this information, and that's that internalization that leads to this man becoming hateful and being bitter and looking to harm others because he has internalized this information as fact without ever checking any of the information presented to him. And that's, again, what makes beta males extremely dangerous, is that these men are feeling about information, not thinking about information. And that's why solutions to deal with this beta male aren't something you can do like what President Trump presented regarding having armed guards in places like churches and synagogues, because having an armed guard would not have solved it, because in the case of Nicholas Cruz, the mass shooter who shot up Stoneman Douglas High School, we had a armed guard at that Stoneman Douglas, but that armed guard never engaged in that incident. That deputy never engaged. He simply stood outside like the coward he was, and because he stood outside and did not act, what happened was many children and adults lost their lives at Stoneman Douglas High School. So that already destroys President Trump's argument regarding armed guards. And the same argument your Democrat Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams proposed was off-duty officers should go to church armed. Again, this does not stop these mass shooters. The mass shooters' problem doesn't have to do with guns. The mass shooter's problem has to do with his upbringing and the fact that he has learned how to feel instead of thinking critically. Because a boy who grows up learning how to be emotional is something that is extremely dangerous to a society. And when you have 2 to 3 generations of boys who grew up in single mother households learning how to feel, you have literally hundreds of millions of landmines all across this country, and all it takes is one incident to set them off. In the same way Robert Bowers was set off, the same way Elliot Rodger was set off, the same way Omar Mateen was set off, and the same way many others have been set off. And what should be alarming to most Americans regarding these mass shooters is that we are seeing an increase in these incidents, and that these incidents continue to get worse instead of better. And I've said that these incidents get worse instead of better because most Americans, again, are looking at them as isolated incidents and not looking at the pattern over the last 30 years, a pattern that continues to increase. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we literally had 3 mass shootings in one day. But because most Americans aren't looking at the bigger picture regarding these mass shooters, they can't see how these acts of violence are getting worse and how they are increasing in frequency, and they're not looking at the foundation of what is causing them to increase in frequency. And what is causing them to increase in frequency is the fact that we are raising boys to become dysfunctional men, and these dysfunctional men do not know how to navigate a course in life because most of these men have learned feminine life skills, and because they have learned feminine life skills, these men are so busy feeling about problems that they run the ideas around and around in their head until they literally snap, and then that makes them ticking time bombs, and these time bombs literally explode as these men simmer and boil in rage, and then as they explode in this rage, they go out here and participate in increasingly horrific acts of violence. Another argument people have regarding these beta males, again, is gun control. And again, gun control will not stop a beta male because in the United Kingdom, they have strict gun laws, and those strict gun laws don't stop the beta males from participating in knifing sprees where they literally use knives to go out here and participate in their acts of violence. And gun control laws did not stop Adam Lanza. They did not stop Elliot Rodger. Again, all these men bought their guns legally to participate in their acts of violence, which, again, the least common denominator, the common denominator in all of these acts of violence is these beta males being raised in these single mother households, and the fact that we have over 3 generations of these beta males running around. These men have no male life skills. These men have no male survival skills. These men have no critical thinking skills, and these men do not know how to problem solve, and they don't know how to put a period at the end of things. And because these men do not know how to critically think, do not know how to problem solve, and do not have male life skills and survival skills, this is what's leading to them becoming extremely angry, extremely frustrated, and participating in these acts of violence and going to forums on social media to vent their anger and frustration before they participate in these acts of violence. Most people say they did not know what the warning signs were regarding this Robert Bowers, but as someone who has done research on these mass shooters and their pattern, I could easily identify the pattern emerging almost immediately just from the special report. I almost knew immediately. I said, this is a beta male, and he probably comes from a single mother household. This man is probably, again, like they said, really reclusive, which would be what we saw with Elliot Rodger, Stephen Paddock, and many of these other ones. And that these guys literally, they cannot hold jobs. They are really, really silent in some cases. Some of them are open, but a lot of them, most of their lives are online. And this secret life that they have online literally paints a picture of a man in crisis, because this is the other issue people don't want to see, because they just see the violence these men participate in, but they're not seeing that this beta male. This is a beta male, and these beta males are in crisis because no one has taught these males life skills, survival skills, and because these men don't have life skills and survival skills, they become frustrated and angry because they don't know how to make life work in the world, because they've learned feminine life skills, and the way females survive is different from males, And what they do is they try to use female life skills in the world, and they don't work. And that's what makes them very angry when they find out that the world works differently for women than it does for men. And again, that's another thing that triggers their anger and makes them want to look for scapegoats to blame instead of taking responsibility for their own lives. But America's approach regarding these mass shooters is another problem, and this is the big problem with America. Is again, we don't want to acknowledge the real elephant in the room regarding these mass shooters, and that is the way we have raised boys to become men here in America over the last 50 years. Because the way we have raised boys to become men over the last 50 years is we have raised them to become these soft males, and these soft males, again, do not know how to navigate a course in the world for themselves because they have learned these feminine life skills. They've learned how the world operates for women, and that's what's leading to most of these men malfunctioning, short-circuiting, and them exploding to participate in this spectrum of violent behaviors. Because that's the other thing most people need to understand about these mass shooters is that they are on the extreme as related to the spectrum of violent behaviors that these beta males participate in. Because your beta male can participate in anything from as related to a screaming fit to posting these types of posts where they go out here and make this hate speech online, to sending penis pictures to people they don't like, to going and flooding somebody's comment section or somebody's inbox, to actually going out here and hitting someone, all the way up to killing a girlfriend, and then all the way up to the extremes, which are these mass shootings. So there's a spectrum of violent behaviors regarding these males, and most people, again, they are so caught up in their emotions regarding these acts of violence like mass shootings that they can't see the bigger picture regarding the way we have been raising boys here in America. Because if we take a critical look at the way we have been raising boys here in America, we would understand why these acts of violence can not only continue to happen, but the reason why they have been increasing in frequency. And the reason, again, why these acts of violence increase in frequency is because we have these beta males who have been raised with feminine frame of thinking, and they feel emotionally, and they feel like they have no value, no worth, and no purpose as men. And because they feel like they have no value, no worth, and purpose as men, that's why they are destroying the world around them in these horrific acts of violence like mass shootings. But most Americans, again, are so caught up in their emotions regarding the hate and regarding this incident in Pittsburgh that they're not looking at the bigger picture regarding the dysfunctional way we've been raising boys. They're getting caught up in side arguments like gun control, armed guards, and that's not what this issue is all about. The issue Americans really need to deal with is the fact that we need to change the way we raise boys. We need to find a way to let boys know that they have value as men, and we need to bring fathers back into the home, because fathers in the home is something that could decrease these acts of violence, and it's something that could teach boys that they have value and purpose, and it could also lead to boys gaining a better understanding of self and finding some sort of worth. And this is something most Americans don't want to talk about, and they don't want to talk about it because in gynocentric America, we've taught men that they have no value. But again, one of the reasons why we have all these men destroying the world is because they don't see a value as a man, and it's something we really need to start dealing with, because as I'm seeing it, these acts of violence are not only getting worse, they are increasing in frequency, and these mass shooters are happening to the point where, again, we had almost 3 mass shootings in one day, and most people, while they mourn the loss of life in these mass shootings, they're not thinking about how we can prevent these mass shootings. And I believe the only way we can really prevent a lot more of these mass shootings from happening in the future is we're going to have to really start taking a look at our society, taking a look at the way we raise boys, and really making efforts to make some resources and invest in men and their growth and development. And we're going to have to really work towards changing the world so that the father has a place in society. So though boys see a man, they see a place for themselves and a purpose for their own lives. If you'd like to learn more about the way beta males behave and think and why beta males are motivated to participate in mass shootings, you can pick up my new nonfiction book, The Man Crisis, in paperback and Kindle. And if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read The Man Crisis for free. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.